Don't you worry, the clip's about to begin, but don't forget to subscribe. Or else, don't make me turn this website around.
We're going to talk to Hunter. We're going to take call 6. Hi, Hunter. You're on the line. What would you like to talk about today, Hunter?
Hello. How are you?
I am lovely, my friend. How are you?
Doing good, Hunter. What's up?
Doing great.
What would you like to talk about?
I called this show maybe a couple weeks ago. I don't know if you remember. We discussed the kind of like Aristotelian cosmological argument and got into things like divine simplicity and
vaguely,
the consequences of that belief.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And I just I wanted to know like what your objections were to the first cause argument, why you do not believe that the cosmological argument, as promulgated by people like Aristotle and perhaps most famously by Aquinas, succeeds.
So are we talking? So how is that differentiated from the Kalam? Like as William Lane Craig would use it, for example, let's say.
Sure. So the Kalam cosmological argument deals with a temporal causation. You know, the idea being that if everything had a beginning, or everything that begins to exist has a cause.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Whereas the Thomistic and Aristotelian cosmological argument deal with causally or series ordered per se, causally, and consequently deal with the here and now. Perhaps in like more common parlance, it's considered like an argument about a sustaining cause. The idea that there needs to be actus purus ipsum esse subsistens to account for the act impotency within the world here and now, and that argument, so the proponents of it would argue, would work even if the universe were eternal.
So it's not about the start of the universe. It's about what is currently sustaining the universe. The argument is that something is required in order to sustain the current state of affairs. Yeah?
Yes.
That sound about right? But like a super, really low-level Shannon-type synopsis.
do you go further,
I am not
though?
A philosopher.
Yeah, I am wondering, though, do you go further and propose that you have the answer to that? Because when I often hear that there has to be a first cause, or how can this just keep going on without a God? I'm of the position like I don't know what started this all and what continues it, and I'm okay with that uncertainty. I would love to be able to one day understand what the answer to it is. But my question to you is, do you go further? Do you say, well, because the universe started or seems to have started or seems to be continuing, then it follows that there must be this explanation? Do you go that far, or are you content with saying this is an interesting phenomena, I wonder what the heck is going on, and then you sort of leave it there?
I would argue that we can come to know through rational argumentation that there is a first cause. Now, as to the nature of that first cause, I think that requires further argumentation. I think the establishment of a first cause that has certain attributes is something that is derivable through a rational argumentation, yes.
So you can rationally argue that there was a first cause, but your argument wouldn't reveal what the cause was. Is that what you're saying?
So the argument would reveal, if the argument is successful, it purports to reveal that there is a current first cause that has certain attributes, including simplicity, omnipresence, omnipotence, perfection, and many other of the other things that Aquinas labeled the divine attributes. So yeah, and these would come as a logical necessity of what the first cause would entail. Yes.
Is this the biggest reason why you think that there's a God?
It's a major contributing factor. Yes, absolutely. I wouldn't say it's the only reason. It's by no means the only reason, but it is a contributing factor. Yes.
Because I often wonder when I meet people who have this position, if they were less sure that God was real before they discovered these arguments for the first cause or the continuation of the universe. Let me ask you this. Were you less sure God was real until you discovered these arguments for the first cause and so on?
I was an atheist before I discovered those arguments.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting. I would be open to hearing those arguments, although I've heard arguments for the Kalam, for example. I'm certainly open to hearing them. I don't know, Shannon, if you want to go into that level of detail, we can if you want.
Oh, I muted myself. I'm just listening. You go right ahead. I'm done talking right now. You go.
Yeah. How many arguments are there? What am I committing myself to here?
Yeah. Well, I know that the format is a call-in show, so we won't go over all of them. If you really are interested, the best resource is to go straight to the horse's mouth and read from the prima pars of the Summa Theologica, at the very beginning of it. St. Thomas, I believe it's question 4, where he details the arguments he proposes for the existence of God, with the first 3 of his 5 ways being perhaps the most famous. And I think that, in my opinion, are the strongest of the. And I think that the 3rd way in particular is up there. But without going super duper deep into like the Thomistic jargon, I think that we can think of the argument as dealing with understanding that there are certain things in the world that are composites of act and potency, or actuality and potentiality, which is to say that there are certain things that exist but could not exist. And what I mean by could not exist is not we're dealing with like the question of whether we live in a deterministic universe, but recognizing that it is the fact that there are certain things that exist now but do not, that did not in the past, or do not or will not in the future. So like I'm sitting at my desk right now, and there's a cup next to me, and there's an explanation for why that cup exists, which is to say that we can look at the material that makes up the cup and say that it is formed or shaped in a certain way. We can go deeper. We can look at the chemical microstructure. We can look at the atoms that bond together to make up this cup. We can go deeper. We can go to the quarks, the leptons, the gluons, and at that point you're getting above my pay grade. But the point being is that what we see is a chain of causality here, in which the latter parts of the chain depend on the concurrent existence of the prior parts of the chain in order to account for their own being, which is to say that if those atoms which made up the cup were all of a sudden across the room or across the country, that cup would no longer be there. In other words, that cup's existence right now is causally dependent on other factors. Well, that chain cannot in principle go on forever. The analogy I would use would be, it's like if you plug in your computer to a power strip, like an extension cord power strip. Well, what if you plug that power strip into another power strip, or plug that power strip into a further one? And, I would argue it is nonsensical to argue that you could power up your computer by plugging it into an infinitely long number of power strips. Eventually you have to reach the wall, which is to say something that by its very power powers it. Something that does not derive its ability to give power, but simply is power.
Yeah, I think I follow. I follow you.
That's kind of the bare bones of it. I hope that St. Thomas is looking down on me with a smile, but I think that I gave it a good.
Yeah, it's good. It's been a while since I've read Aquinas, but it's my understanding, because I remember thinking Aquinas is starting with the assumption that there's a God. and then he's drawing all these conclusions for it. But it's been a while since I've read it, so I'll have to refamiliarize myself with it. It seems logical that there has to be, like, if someone were to ask me, like, what's the best argument for there being a God, that might be the one that I would sort of point to. But then
Sure.
I still think it's an unknown, because, well, which is there a specific God? Are we arguing for deism here? Could it be? Does it have to be a God? So I guess I'm still stuck at the first point of saying, how are you concluding that this could have only happened by a perfect entity that started it all? That's where I would be.
Sure.
I don't know if I necessarily want to go further than that on this call, but I'm interested. I'm very interested in it. What's that?
So I would say that what we can derive. So if let's say, for the sake of argument, that we admit, okay, there's got to be a first cause in this causal series, right? I know that that's an argument in itself, but just for the sake of discussion,
right,
let's grant it, and then let's ask ourselves, okay, do we know anything at all about this? Do we know anything at all about this first cause?
But see, I don't think. Hold on, I don't think I can go. I don't think that I can go beyond that first point. I could entertain the hypothetical that there has to be a first cause, but in the interest of hosting a show, I'm reluctant to give the impression that I'm agreeing with you because I'm not. I'm still at that first stage of saying, I'm saying, like, I'm definitely interested in entertaining what you have to say about that, but I'm not willing to hop on board your hypothetical by granting you the idea that there could only be a first cause, and that first cause is a deity of some kind. I mean, the classic. Right. So what if this just was always here, or maybe this is just sort of a continuous boom bust cycle of starts and finishes.
Well, interestingly, I mean, Aristotle, who first elucidated this argument, believed himself that the universe was eternal, and Aquinas did not think that he could rationally prove that the universe was not eternal. He believed that the universe was not, and that was as a result of his religious faith. But he did not believe that you could prove it. And so, this argument, as I would argue, and as adherents to this line of reasoning would argue, has no bearing on whether or not the universe is eternal, always existed, whether the Big Bang really was the beginning, or whether it was a continuous boom-bust cycle. But that we do actually, that by the very fact that there are certain extant things which have causal dependency on each other, that there has to be something which is pure actuality.
Well, I don't know what that exactly means. that could be worth unpacking too. I assume that you mean that that's like a higher power or a god, pure actuality.
Right.
It's comprised of no parts.
What I would say is that
possible.
I actually have a question for you, Hunter.
Yeah.
Have you completely excluded natural causes for the universe?
So I would. So natural. You mean like laws of nature?
Physics.
No, I'm talking like that. Maybe the start and end of universes is simply a natural phenomena that just happens to be the case. Like, are you open to the idea that there is a natural explanation? No. Are you open to the idea that there's a natural explanation for the start of our universe? Or are you closed off at this point because it's been
open to it? Sure, I'm open to it, but the reason that I don't believe it is because I think that first cause would have to have certain attributes by logical deduction, which would exclude the possibility of it being natural.
I think the classical theist. Sorry.
Go ahead, Shannon. I forgot what I was going to say. Is it fair to say that I forgot what my question was, honestly.
That's my fault. Sorry. When I hear people talking about the classical theist gods, I'm like, I have questions about why create. Like the why create question for the classical theist god, because if you're completely impassible and you're existing in a state of like no constituent parts and you're whole unto your own and your entire existence is eternal, and from start to finish you're in a state of pure happiness and nothing can have like a detrimental effect on you, then the why create question from the classical theist perspective comes really strongly into play, right? Because you exist in it. If you're purporting to having a God that exists in a state of pure absolute satisfaction and happiness in his natural state, what would have motivated him to need something external to himself?
Right, and that's an excellent question. And so there are two prongs to this answer. The first is God need not have created. He does not gain anything for himself ontologically or metaphysically in so doing.
He couldn't for the classical theist God. He couldn't because he was already perfect. He couldn't based on that God description, like based on the Thomistic classical Aquinas description of God, right?
And so the act of creation is an act of selfless love, an act of manifesting the beauty that was within the divine nature and sharing it among. As an act of pure selflessness or pure love. It is not something that God.
Is that one of the attributes that you're talking about?
Sorry.
I'm sorry. I was wondering. I cut you off, but I'm sorry. I try not to do that. You had mentioned it earlier that there are certain attributes that you think have to be in play in order for the universe to have a causer. Like, how are you developing these attributes? Are you sort of backing into them logically? How did you come up with these? Yeah. Is the love one of those attributes? Like there has to be a loving God that started it.
Right. Yes. I would say that the first cause has to have an aspect of love within it, and that is in itself derived from that there has to be that it has to be good. The reason being is because there cannot be the argument so goes that that first cause cannot have no admixture of actuality and potentiality, because then that first cause would constitute a composite being. But the parts of a composite are logically prior to the whole, and so at that point we would just be pushing the domino back a further stage, and so you have to eventually halt the regress at something that is absolutely simple. And that love, at least in like the classic Thomistic conception of love, which is to will the good of the other, it would necessarily be a constituent property of that first cause, because the fulfillment of something's actuality.
I have so many questions right now. I have so many questions. Okay, so I've been on characteristically shutting the fuck up, and that's not usually my thing. So if you're so I understand what you're saying. So you're using love as the foundation that all the turtles are standing on, so that they have a foundation to stand on, and that they're not turtles all the way down, right? So you're saying for whatever reason, because to solve the problem of why create, if the God you're talking about, the deity you're talking about, is impassible and exists in a state of like pure self-satisfaction, you need a reason. So this God needs to have a desire then, though. So like loving somebody is a state of emotion, and that state of emotion affects impassibility, because then you have desires for and are affected by things that are external to you, right? So if I love you, then I'm affected by you, and then that affects impassibility, does it not? Otherwise, if we can have an effect,
the love of God is not emotive in the way that love exists in creatures.
How could you? It seems like you're making that up as you go, though.
Yeah, I mean,
what do you mean by that?
I'm honestly envisioning a.
When I say love, I don't mean love. I mean,
That's right.
love, not love.
I'm thinking of a manipulative God who maybe wants us to think that he loves us or something. I'm not exactly following. I know you
Right.
define
So,
love as the will to to will the goal. What was it? To will the good of others, I think, was your definition of love. Yeah, I'm wondering, are you talking about an emotional state that
no.
because humans? No. Okay. So when you define the word love for us, maybe that might be good.
Yeah.
So love is a passion of the will, and it is part of what Aquinas calls the intellective appetite. And insofar as the intellective appetite moves through the medium of the sensitive appetite within the created order, but that is only in such things that have a composite which includes a cognitive faculty. Given that would not be the case in God, we can reason analogously that, and given that that we used to say that God rejoices by an operation that is one and simple, to quote Aristotle, that his act of the will, which is to say an act of goodness, is not emotive in the sense that it exists in us, because that would be, as I think that Shannon was alluding to, that would contradict my own claim that God is immutable, because she is correct that if we construe God loving in the same in defining love univocally as opposed to merely analogously, then we would run into an issue here. But
then we're back to why create, because if he doesn't care about us and we can't have an effect on him, and how we feel doesn't matter to him, and he's completely indifferent to us, then why be selfless unless then he's feeling some fifis then.
Would you say that the fact, I'm wondering, Hunter, if you think the fact that there's humans around is backing the arguments that you have? Like, are humans the evidence that leads you to think that there's this attribute of love? No. Like, if there weren't any humans around, would the argument still stand?
Good question.
Would the argument still stand? So I think it would be difficult for us to be able to derive it. I think that it would nonetheless still exist in God. I think that if for example, there were no beings around who had a conception of love, then I think it would be very difficult for them to reason about love in any way, right? So to that extent, I'm thinking that maybe that's not what you're meaning to ask.
So are you suggesting that we're the point then?
Sorry.
This is where I'm getting caught up. So, and I think Anthony's question is good for this reason, like really good for this reason, because if he created a universe without us in it, and he was doing it selflessly to share his perfection or whatever, then there would be no one to share it with, right? So in order for it to be selfless, there needed to be agents involved to be on the other end of that transaction of selflessness. So God creating the universe was transactional in that aspect, because we would be the purpose for the universe. Yeah. In this understanding, we would have to be, right?
This might be another way of looking at it. It's a question, but would it be impossible for this God to create a universe without any humans in it? Is it dependent? Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Yes. Did you say yes?
I mean, for example, for example, I'm open to the idea that they're like extraterrestrial life. In fact, I think that the expansiveness of the universe creates a very strong case that there either is or has been intelligent extraterrestrial life.
I need to interject here. I want to interject here real quick.
Of course.
Do you think does evolution factor in here at all? Like, would your argument of God having this? Go ahead.
I think that the the evidence for evolution is extraordinarily strong. I think that it is almost to the point of being like an indisputable fact that through processes of natural selection, humans evolved from proto-human ancestors. I don't see how to. I mean,
okay.
Yeah,
you're on board with evolution. You're on board with evolution. So I guess if you're on board with evolution, then I think we go back to could this God have only been the first cause if humans were the result?
No, could this God have only? So it need not have been the case that humans were around for there still to be God, and we can reason through this because of the existence of actuality and potentiality in the world, and that series of actuality and potentiality in the world cannot regress indefinitely or infinitely, and in fact has to terminate in something which is purely actual, or in other words, is purely simple. And that would be the case.
You kind of lost me on that a little bit, but I might want to clarify my question just a little bit. And I don't know how much time we want to go down this road, but I'm freaking loving this talk, because when I find myself feeling uncomfortable about the questions or the things that I'm hearing, that's an opportunity for me to grow. So I want to rephrase my question a little bit. Like, could this God only create a universe if there were entities that could express the emotion of love? So I'm taking humans, because there might be life on other planets and they actually have the ability to have the emotion of love.
Right.
But it's not, you want to add to that? Because
there are two ways to answer that. Yeah, I'm sorry if I'm interrupting you. I think there may be a delay.
There's a little bit of a delay, but go ahead.
This is fascinating. I'm you know what's really interesting? If I'm actually shutting the hell up, so keep going. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just didn't want. I want to make sure I got your question, that you finished asking your question, so I can do my best to answer it.
Let me rephrase it, or sort of catch us up, and kind of summarize where I think we're at. I think you said that there's lots of different attributes that make you think that this first cause has to be an entity of some sort. And you brought up this idea of love, and then we started exploring, well,
so I'm actually going to stop you there, because God is not an entity in the strict sense. God is not a being, or he's not ens summa, as Aquinas, like highest being, but rather ipsum esse, which is to say being itself. God is the act of to be. He is that which has no, so he does not belong to the genus being, but rather is the very act of to be.
God just is. That what you're saying?
Right. I mean, it is to quote the Bible. I mean, in Exodus he says, "Who are you?" And the great I am. Right, God is. Period.
But from my perspective, we're having a conversation where we're trying to back into the conclusion that this couldn't all happen or be here without a first cause, a causer, is what I keep coming back to. We're clear on that, right? Like, you're of the position that there's a causer, and this causer has certain attributes. And one of these attributes, let's say there's 10 attributes, and we're going through one of them, and there's this idea of love. If you came to realize that you can't demonstrate, let me ask you this. Do you think that you can demonstrate any of those attributes? Can you demonstrate this attribute of, what'd you call it? This attribute of love and goodness that you think that this causer has?
I believe that God's goodness can be. I believe that God's goodness can be demonstrated. Yes.
How does it manifest? Like, what would we look at to say, when I observe that, or when I experience that, that is the goodness and love of this causer, and therefore the attribute. Therefore, this causer has. And therefore, this causer has that attribute.
I'm sorry. It's the delay. Let me know when you're
I
finished.
know. I'm done. Please.
Okay, I apologize. I hope that I'm not meaning to be rude.
No.
I'm
No.
trying to be
You're
responsive.
so fine, Hunter. There's a lag. You're okay, honey.
That's
Okay,
happening to Shannon and I too, so it's all cool.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a wonderful.
And maybe like 5 more minutes on
and I
this,
think
and
that
maybe
there are
we can move on to somebody else.
Yeah, actually, this is going to be our last
yeah,
call.
I think.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yep,
Okay,
Hunter's our last call.
I'll make it
So it better be good,
done.
Hunter.
Okay. All right.
Now's your chance.
Let me get my thinking cap on. I'll make it very quick.
Sure.
I think that there are like 2 basic ways. One is something appealing to what we can call the principle of proportionate causality, which is to say that this first cause, if it exists, which is, when we can see it as the sustaining cause within it, has to contain all of the perfections that exist in beings within itself, which is to say that you cannot give that which you do not have, in some sense, and that doesn't it needs to be actually present, but it needs to be present in the sense that you have the motive power to be able to affect it. And so therefore all perfections that exist in the world must exist in the first cause. And we call those things good. We call that which is the perfection of things, or or to use the Aristotelian language, the fulfillment of something's immanent teleology. We consider that to be good. That is what we define as good. And so therefore, via the principle of proportionate causality, it must exist. All perfections must exist in some way in God. As to whether we can ascribe, in a sense, we can ascribe all effects in the world to God. But at the same time, this is not to deny that God doesn't work through secondary causes, such as the natural forces of the world. There are, I would obviously assert that there are such things as miracles, but, God's workings in the world does not preclude him working through secondary causes, such as the laws of nature or the beings or the creatures, the created order within nature.
Okay. I apologize, but my eyes are glazing over, and I didn't really catch a lot of what you said. So, but it's interesting, and I think, oh gosh, I mean, we need definitions of words, and this is deep. This is deep. Do you hang out in any of the groups or the Discord server? Is this a one-off call? Do you call in frequently to shows, or are you reachable beyond the show?
I don't. I called in once before. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, I was an atheist for most of my life, and I did come to believe in God largely through reading these arguments. But I also recognized that I was very confident in my atheism a long time ago, and I now believe that I was wrong. And I hope that I'm not so arrogant as to assert that I couldn't be wrong now. I recognize the possibility that I'm wrong, and so I relish the opportunity to discuss and hear the arguments from people who believe that I'm very wrong, because I am but a man. I can make mistakes, and I'm very open to the possibility that I could be wrong.
Good. That's healthy. If we were to meet or something, like if we were, what I would envision doing with you is like sketching this out, writing it out, getting definitions of terms, mapping it, like sitting down with you and mapping it out and seeing how you're putting all this together and coming to the conclusion that you're coming to. I think it's healthy that you're open to taking another look at it. I'm certainly open to considering what you have to say, because maybe it can be demonstrated argumentatively that this couldn't happen without a first causer. I'm content with saying, I don't know, but I'm open to hearing what you have to say. Thank you for calling, and hit me up somewhere, like join, maybe, it might be cool. There's a Discord server for the ACA. Is there a Discord server for the line? What do you do, Shannon? Do you direct people to that, or?
There is indeed a Discord server for the line. Yes, there is. Absolutely.
I need to join that one. That could be fun. Yeah. But what I think will be really helpful is anyone.
I could also send you a message on YouTube or something, and if you ever, if I don't know if you or I could send you a personal message through Facebook or some other medium, and if you ever wanted to talk about this via Zoom or something, I'd be more than happy to do so.
I don't know if well, we'll see. I have a website, which is my name, my full first name and last name, with like a variety of different ways for people to contact me. So email might be a good first start.
Sure.
Is that it, Shannon? You want to?
Yeah, no, it's good. I was just waiting for you guys to.
Are you busy?
To finish your date, to set up your date. All right. We will let you go, Hunter. Thank you very much for calling. It's always a pleasure to have a chat with you. Although I didn't really say much this time because it was so interesting listening to you guys. Have a good night. See you later.
Hey, thanks for checking out this clip for The Line. While you're here, hit that like button, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and then share this with that bitter uncle of yours who loves talking about the good old days.